665 seconds. That's how long it took for a nightclub fire to kill 192 people. While security guards held the emergency exits closed from the outside, and the footage was so damning that prosecutors tried to have every copy destroyed. They tell you disasters are unavoidable. They call them accidents, tragedies, acts of God. But what if I told you that nearly every major disaster you've heard of and dozens you haven't were entirely preventable? That engineers predicted them, sometimes years in advance. That companies and governments knew exactly what would happen and chose profit over human life. That the evidence proving this exists on video, in documents, and in testimony that powerful people spent millions trying to suppress. What I'm about to show you isn't speculation. These are disasters with body counts in the thousands where smoking gun evidence proves the people in charge knew death was coming and did nothing. Worse, they actively prevented people from saving themselves because evacuation would be expensive, because admitting danger would create liability, because stopping operations would reduce profits. In the next 20 minutes, you're going to see footage they tried to ban. You'll read documents they tried to classify. You'll hear testimony from survivors they tried to silence with lawsuits and threats. You'll discover that the deadliest building collapse in American history happened because inspectors were bribed to ignore cracks visible to the naked eye. You'll learn about a factory fire where workers were locked inside because management feared they'd de-steal products if doors were unlocked. You'll find out about a tunnel collapse that killed 41 workers after the construction company ignored 17 safety reports warning that catastrophic failure was imminent. These aren't natural disasters. They're murder by spreadsheet. Corporate executives and government officials doing literal cost-benefit analyses where your life is the cost and their profit is the benefit. And the pattern is so consistent, so predictable, so well documented that once you see it, you'll never look at accidents the same way again. But first, we need to talk about what happened in West Bengal, India on March 31st, 2016, when infrastructure collapsed and the evidence was so clear that officials tried to flee the country. March 31st, 2016. Kolkata, West Bengal, India. The Vivekananda Road overpass was a massive elevated highway project designed to ease traffic congestion in one of India's most densely populated cities. The overpass was supposed to be completed in 2007. By 2016, 9 years behind schedule, it still wasn't finished. But it was occupied. People lived in slums directly under the partially constructed bridge, vendors operated shops beneath it, and thousands of commuters walked under it daily. The construction company responsible was IVRCL, a major Indian infrastructure firm. The project had been plagued with problems from the beginning. Cost overruns, contract disputes, allegations of corruption, and most critically, repeated warnings from engineers about structural integrity problems. In 2013, 3 years before the collapse, an independent structural engineer hired by a concerned citizen group inspected the visible portions of the overpass and filed a report with local authorities. The report was explicit. The overpass showed signs of poor quality concrete, inadequate reinforcement, and design flaws that made collapse likely. The report recommended immediate halt of construction pending full structural assessment. The report was ignored. Local officials claimed an independent inspection was unnecessary interference and that the construction company's own inspections were sufficient. In 2014, cracks appeared in one of the main support pillars. Residents living beneath the overpass photographed the cracks and submitted complaints to the Kolkata Municipal Corporation. They were told the cracks were cosmetic and posed no danger. The cracks continued to widen. By early 2016, some cracks were over 6 inches wide and visible from ground level. Residents organized a protest. On March 15, 2016, approximately 200 people gathered beneath the overpass demanding construction be halted until safety could be guaranteed. Police dispersed the protest and arrested 3 organizers for creating public nuisance. Meanwhile, IVRCL was under immense pressure to complete the project. Every month of delay meant penalties written into the contract. The company was already losing money on the project due to cost overruns. Internal communications, later obtained through court proceedings, show company executives discussing ways to finish quickly and minimize additional costs. One way to finish quickly: skip certain concrete curing times. Concrete needs time to properly set and achieve full strength. The standard curing time for structural concrete is 28 days. Internal documents show IVRCL was curing concrete for only 7 to 10 days before proceeding with additional construction, quadrupling the speed of work but using concrete at only 60 to 70% of design strength. Another way to minimize costs: use less steel reinforcement than specified in engineering drawings. Steel rebar is expensive. Several whistleblowers who worked on the project later testified that they were instructed to space rebar further apart than design specifications required and to use thinner gauge rebar than called for. When they objected, they were told to follow instructions or be fired. Sudipta Bhattacharya was a shop owner operating a small electronics store directly beneath the overpass. He'd lived in the area his entire life. "We all knew it was dangerous," he said in an interview after the disaster. "The cracks got bigger every month. We could see rust stains where water was seeping through the concrete. Sometimes we heard creaking sounds like metal bending. We complained constantly. Nobody listened. They told us we were uneducated and didn't understand engineering. They said the bridge was perfectly safe." On March 29, 2016, 48 hours before the collapse, a new crack appeared in the section of overpass directly above Burrabazar, Kolkata's wholesale market district, one of the most densely populated commercial areas in the city. The crack was massive, running the entire width of the bridge deck. Residents called emergency services. Municipal inspectors visited the site. Their assessment: the crack was not immediately dangerous. No evacuation was ordered, no warning was issued. Construction continued. 36 hours later, at approximately 11:45 a.m. on March 31st, the overpass would collapse during peak business hours when thousands of people were directly underneath. March 31st, 2016, 11:43 a.m. Witnesses describe hearing a sound like thunder, except it came from above rather than the sky. A section of the Vivekananda Road overpass approximately 240 feet long, roughly the length of 2/3 of a football field, suddenly detached from its support pillars and fell 90 feet to the ground below. The falling concrete and steel weighed approximately 3,500 tons. It fell for approximately 2.2 seconds before impact. When it hit, it didn't just collapse, it exploded. The force of impact shattered the concrete into fragments that flew outward like shrapnel, shredding everything within a 100-foot radius. The section that collapsed fell directly onto Burrabazar, the wholesale market area, during peak morning business hours. The market was packed. Vendors had set up temporary stalls beneath the overpass. Delivery trucks were loading and unloading goods. Shoppers moved through narrow lanes between stalls. Residents lived in multi-story buildings that lined both sides of the street. The collapse happened so quickly that almost nobody had time to react. One moment people were conducting business. The next moment, 3,500 tons of concrete and steel obliterated everything beneath it. Ranjit Das was a delivery driver waiting in his truck approximately 50 feet from the collapse zone. "I heard a cracking sound and looked up," he described. "I saw the bridge separating from the pillars. I saw it falling. I started screaming but no sound came out. I watched it hit. The ground shook like an earthquake. A wave of dust and debris came toward me like a tsunami. I couldn't see anything for maybe 5 minutes. When the dust cleared, everything was just gone. The street, the shops, the people, all just crushed flat under this massive slab of concrete." The collapse created what rescue workers would later describe as a concrete sandwich: multiple layers of crushed vehicles, market stalls, and buildings compressed together under the weight of the overpass. People were trapped in void spaces throughout this compressed debris field, some alive, most not. Rescue efforts began immediately but were chaotic. The debris was too heavy for manual removal. Heavy machinery was needed, but bringing in excavators and cranes risked further collapse of unstable sections of the overpass still standing. And every minute that passed meant people trapped alive in void spaces were dying from crush injuries, suffocation, or dehydration. Rescue workers could hear people screaming from within the debris. One rescue coordinator described it as the worst sound imaginable, hearing voices calling for help and knowing we couldn't reach them fast enough. They worked frantically, sometimes using bare hands to move smaller pieces of debris, but the sheer weight and volume of material made progress agonizingly slow. In some cases, rescuers reached trapped victims only to find they couldn't be extracted without heavy equipment that would take hours to position. Several trapped victims died while rescue workers held their hands and could do nothing but watch them succumb to their injuries. The official death toll would eventually reach 79, with over 90 injured. But independent investigators and journalists who examined the scene believe the real death toll was significantly higher. The collapse occurred in an area where many people lived and worked illegally: squatters, undocumented workers, homeless people. These individuals wouldn't appear on official casualty lists because officially they weren't supposed to exist. Furthermore, several bodies recovered from the debris were never identified and never claimed. In the chaos of the disaster and the subsequent investigation, these unidentified victims were buried in mass graves. Their deaths were recorded, but their identities remain unknown. The disaster was horrific, but what happened next was arguably worse. Within hours of the collapse, evidence emerged that this wasn't an accident. It was negligent homicide. And the people responsible knew exactly what they'd done and immediately began trying to escape the country. Stop for a moment and search for Kolkata overpass collapse on YouTube. Watch the videos people filmed in the immediate aftermath. You'll see something chilling. In multiple videos filmed within minutes of the collapse, you can see the massive crack that appeared 48 hours earlier. It's clearly visible in the debris. It was visible before the collapse. Municipal inspectors had looked directly at it and declared it safe. Now ask yourself, how does a crack wide enough to see from ground level, running the entire width of a bridge, get classified as not immediately dangerous? The answer is in a briefcase. A briefcase full of cash delivered to inspectors' offices. We know this because the investigation that followed the disaster uncovered a bribery network so extensive, so well documented, so brazen that it involved over 40 officials and politicians. They weren't just ignoring safety problems, they were being paid to ignore them. And when the bridge collapsed, when 79 people died, when the evidence of bribery became undeniable, these officials didn't express remorse. They didn't rush to help victims. They tried to flee the country. But this wasn't an isolated incident. It's not even unique to India. This exact pattern has repeated in disasters across the world, and I'm about to show you the receipts. Within hours of the collapse, police arrested 4 people: the project's site engineer, the site supervisor, and 2 IVRCL company executives who happened to be at the site during the collapse. But the real targets of the investigation were higher up the chain: the executives who had made the decisions to cut costs and the government officials who had accepted bribes to approve substandard work. The investigation moved quickly because the evidence was overwhelming. Structural engineers who examined the debris didn't need sophisticated testing to identify the problems. The concrete quality was visibly substandard, crumbly, porous, with inadequate aggregate mixture. The steel reinforcement was immediately obvious as insufficient, far fewer rebar rods than specifications required, and many of those present were corroded, indicating they'd been exposed to water infiltration for extended periods. Most damning, investigators found that sections of the bridge contained hollow spaces where solid concrete should have been. The construction company had essentially created a hollow shell bridge, using enough concrete to make it look solid from outside but leaving interior sections empty to save material costs. This is called honeycombing and is categorically unacceptable in structural concrete. It reduces load-bearing capacity by up to 70%. Criminal charges were filed against 12 individuals, including IVRCL's chairman and managing director. Arrest warrants were issued, and then something remarkable happened. 5 of the charged executives fled India. They disappeared within 72 hours of being charged, despite court orders freezing their assets and travel bans. How did they escape? Later investigations revealed they were tipped off by officials within the police department who were themselves part of the bribery network. These officials warned the executives that arrests were imminent, giving them time to arrange private flights to Dubai and Singapore before warrants could be executed. The fugitive executives weren't found for months. When they were eventually located, through Interpol cooperation, extradition proceedings took years. As of 2023, 7 years after the collapse, several individuals charged in connection with the disaster had still not faced trial due to legal delays and extradition complications. Meanwhile, the survivors' and victims' families faced a second disaster: the compensation battle. The West Bengal government initially announced compensation of 200,000 rupees, approximately $2,700, per death and 50,000 rupees, approximately $670 for serious injuries. The families rejected this as grossly inadequate. They formed a victims' association and filed a class action lawsuit demanding proper compensation and criminal prosecution of everyone involved in the corruption network. The legal battle continues today. Survivors describe long-term impacts beyond physical injuries. Many lost their businesses, shops, and inventory buried under debris. Many lost their homes, buildings damaged beyond repair and later demolished. Many suffered psychological trauma, PTSD, survivors' guilt, constant anxiety about structural safety of any building or bridge they encounter. Bhakti Roy was a shopkeeper who survived the collapse by pure chance. She had stepped away from her shop to use a bathroom 30 seconds before the bridge fell. Her shop, her inventory, and 3 of her employees were crushed. "I can't work anymore," she said in a 2019 interview. "Every time I hear a loud noise, I think something is falling. I can't go under bridges. I can't work in multi-story buildings. I have panic attacks. The government gave me 70,000 rupees, approximately $950, and told me to rebuild my life. How? Everything I had is gone, and the people who did this are living in luxury in other countries." The environmental impact was also severe. The collapsed concrete contained asbestos and other hazardous materials that contaminated the soil and groundwater in the area. Cleanup took over a year, during which residents continued living and working in contaminated conditions. The investigation into the Kolkata overpass collapse revealed a corruption network that went far beyond simple bribery. It exposed a systematic process where government officials, construction companies, and inspection agencies colluded to certify substandard work in exchange for payoffs at every stage of the project. Here's how the system worked. IVRCL would submit construction work for inspection. Government inspectors would identify deficiencies: inadequate concrete strength, missing rebar, improper curing. IVRCL would deliver cash payments to inspectors. Inspectors would approve the work despite known deficiencies. The project would proceed. Everyone made money until the bridge fell. Investigators found documented evidence of this pattern. Bank records showed large cash withdrawals by IVRCL executives coinciding with inspection dates. Several inspectors had deposited cash amounts that far exceeded their official salaries. Phone records showed frequent communication between IVRCL executives and government officials responsible for project oversight. Most damning, investigators found actual inspection reports, the real ones that had been filed and then replaced with falsified versions. A whistleblower within the Municipal Engineering Department provided copies of original inspection reports that clearly identified critical safety deficiencies and recommended stopping construction. These reports had been stamped rejected and replaced with falsified reports approving the same work. The falsified reports were signed by the same inspectors, but with different content. This proved the inspectors knew the work was substandard, documented it, then deliberately replaced their honest assessments with fraudulent approvals. When this evidence became public, It should have resulted in immediate arrests and prosecutions. Instead, it triggered a political crisis. The construction corruption network extended into the state's ruling political party. Several elected officials were implicated either directly receiving bribes or indirectly appointing unqualified inspectors in exchange for political loyalty. The state government's response was to launch an investigation into the investigation. They claimed the evidence was obtained improperly and that the whistleblower who provided the original inspection reports had violated confidentiality laws. They threatened the whistleblower with prosecution for theft of government documents. The whistleblower, a municipal engineer named Rajab Ghosh, went into hiding. In a video statement released through an anonymous YouTube account, he said, "I provided evidence that could have saved lives if it had been acted on earlier. Now they want to arrest me for exposing corruption instead of arresting the corrupt officials who killed 79 people. This is why things never change. The system protects itself." The West Bengal government also attempted to control the narrative about the disaster. They initially claimed the collapse was caused by an earthquake, a claim that was immediately disproved by seismic data showing no seismic activity at the time. They then claimed it was caused by excessive vibration from nearby construction equipment, also quickly disproved. Eventually, when the evidence of construction defects became undeniable, they shifted to blaming the construction company while denying any government knowledge of problems. But the documentary evidence proved government inspectors had known about problems and approved substandard work anyway. Confronted with this evidence, officials claimed the inspectors had been deceived by the construction company and were victims rather than co-conspirators. This narrative collapsed when bank records and phone logs proved the inspectors had been paid and had communicated regularly with company executives about approvals. Faced with undeniable evidence of systemic corruption, the government prosecuted the lowest-level officials while allowing higher-ranking officials to resign or transfer to other departments. Of the 40-plus officials implicated in the bribery network, only 7 faced criminal charges. The rest either resigned with full pensions or were transferred to other departments with no loss of rank or pay. Many of those who resigned immediately took positions with private construction companies, the same companies they'd been inspecting and taking bribes from. The criminal trials that did proceed moved at a glacial pace. India's court system is notoriously backlogged. The Kolkata overpass cases, despite having clear evidence and public attention, became mired in procedural delays, continuances, and legal maneuvering that ensured nobody would face actual consequences for years or decades. As of 2025, 9 years after the disaster, not a single person convicted in connection with the collapse has served any significant jail time. November 24, 2013, Riga, Latvia. The roof of Maxima supermarket collapsed during peak shopping hours, killing 54 people. Investigation revealed the collapse was caused by overloading. The roof had been designed to support a specific weight, but the building owner had installed a rooftop garden that exceeded design limits by 300%. Structural engineers had warned the roof was unsafe 2 years before the collapse. Their warnings were ignored because removing the garden would be expensive. The building owner was charged with manslaughter but fled to Russia before trial. He remains a fugitive. June 27, 29, Shanghai, China. A 13-story apartment building under construction toppled over intact, falling to its side like a domino. Miraculously, only one construction worker died because the collapse happened during a work break. Investigation revealed the building had inadequate foundation depth to support its height, and that developers had dug a large excavation directly adjacent to the foundation, undermining its stability. Municipal inspectors had approved both the foundation and the excavation despite clear violations of building codes. Investigators found inspectors had received bribes totaling approximately $300,000. 3 inspectors were convicted and served reduced sentences of 2 to 3 years. April 24, 2013, Dhaka, Bangladesh. Rana Plaza collapse killed 1,134 garment workers. The day before the collapse, massive cracks appeared in the building. Engineers inspected the building and declared it unsafe. Police ordered it closed. The building owner, Sohul Rana, threatened workers that they'd lose their jobs if they didn't report to work the next day. Most workers needed the money and reported. The building collapsed the next morning. Rana fled but was captured at the border trying to escape to India. He was convicted of murder in 2023, 10 years after the disaster, and sentenced to 30 years. He's one of the rare cases where an owner actually faced meaningful consequences. July 17, 1981, Kansas City, Missouri, USA. The Hyatt Regency Hotel walkway collapse killed 114 people during a crowded tea dance event. Investigation revealed the suspended walkways were built using a modified design that reduced load capacity by 50% compared to the original approved design. The modification saved approximately $2,000 in materials, but made catastrophic failure inevitable under crowd loading. The engineering firm that approved the modification lost their licenses but faced no criminal charges. Civil settlements totaled $140 million, but nobody went to jail for 114 deaths. May 23, 2012, Elliott Lake, Ontario, Canada. The roof of Algo Center Mall collapsed, killing 2 people. Investigation revealed the roof had been leaking for years, causing structural corrosion. Engineers had inspected the roof and recommended immediate repairs. The mall owner delayed repairs because they were expensive and closing the mall during repairs would lose revenue. The mall was open and operating when the roof finally collapsed. The mall owner declared bankruptcy, which limited legal liability. Criminal charges were considered but never filed. Every single disaster I've described follows the same pattern. Engineers identify risks and recommend fixes. Those recommendations are rejected because safety costs money. Inspectors are bribed or pressured to approve unsafe work. Disasters occur exactly as predicted. Death tolls that should have been 0 become catastrophic. And then the system protects itself. Evidence is suppressed, whistleblowers are threatened, low-level scapegoats are prosecuted while decision-makers escape accountability. This isn't a failure of the system. This is the system. It's working exactly as designed. The fundamental problem is that preventing disasters costs money upfront, while disasters themselves only cost money if you're successfully sued afterward. And if you structure your corporation correctly, employ good enough lawyers, and drag out litigation long enough, even successful lawsuits cost less than proper safety measures. The Kolkata overpass could have been built safely for approximately 30% more than IVRCL actually spent. That 30%, about $12 million, would have saved 79 lives. But from IVRCL's perspective, spending $12 million was guaranteed loss. The risk of collapse and subsequent liability was probability-based. Maybe it happens, maybe it does. Maybe they get sued, maybe they don't. Maybe they lose in court, maybe they don't. They ran the numbers and decided the risk was acceptable. They were wrong, the bridge did collapse and they did face liability. But even then, they made back most of their savings by fleeing the country, leaving a bankrupt subsidiary to handle lawsuits and letting legal delays exhaust victims' resources. This is corporate risk management. Your life is a probability calculation. Your death is an actuarial table entry, and the entire legal system is structured to make gambling with your life more profitable than protecting it. Every disaster you've seen, every accident that killed people when engineers had warned it would happen, every preventable death, they're all the result of this calculation being made over and over again, every single day, by people who have decided your life isn't worth their money. Now you know the truth about man-made disasters. They're not accidents. They're not tragedies. They're predictable outcomes of systematic decisions to value profit over human life. 79 people died in Kolkata because saving $12 million was more valuable than their lives. 114 died in Kansas City because saving $2,000 was more important than their safety. You can research building inspection records in your area. Most are public information. You can demand transparency in infrastructure projects. You can support stronger criminal liability laws that pierce corporate protections when people die from negligence. What shocked you most? The hollow concrete, the executives who fled, or that this pattern continues today? Comment below and share this video. Algorithms bury content that exposes corporate negligence. Subscribe for more investigations they don't want you to see. Every disaster you just learned about was preventable. The next one is being planned right now by someone running the same calculations. Unless we change the incentive structure, nothing changes. They're betting your life isn't worth their money. Prove them wrong.